Hello everybody, welcome back. As part of our training, we basically have gone through so many different aspects in regard to setting up the environment for distribution and trade and possibly supply chain and manufacturing and the rest of it. Everything relates to the site, which is a logical grouping of warehouses. And obviously after that, you have to set up the posting profile to indicate the costing reflected by selling, buying, storing, or producing goods in your environment, which is the warehouse, and posting it into the general ledger, which has already been taken care of by the financial team. That is called item group. And then you have to specify certain policies. We know it as an item model group. I'd like to get started with that because as a quick review, I'd like to show you how to create a proper BOM. And as part of it, I'd like to show you the waste management and also the total calculation, of course, that it should be necessary as part of our training and also part of your consultation. Remember, again, I am focusing more towards making you a better consultant, hopefully, and understand the reasoning when you talk to your clients or colleagues, how to set it up properly for the proper customer. When you get to the field, they ask you, is there any other way? Or you may come up with a situation in which the customer has a very unique scenario in which you have to be a bit more creative. So we get started with inventory breakdown. We talked about the site and warehouses. We talked about how to create locations and aisles associated with it. And we focus on the basic warehousing. However, as I mentioned in my previous sessions, we did not talk about advanced warehouse management, which is separate training. And due to the time, we are not going to place it as part of this series of sessions. We will talk about it in advanced courses. Now, under that, we also brought up your attention into item groups, which, like I said, is just like a linkage of series of different activities that causes financial and physical posting transactions to be hitting the general ledger. And like I said, in order to save some time, as not necessarily a best practice, I use the same account for all of these activities in regard to selling it, buying it, producing it, and storing it. This is important. You should not do that. In reality, finance department is going to give you separate accounts. And as a matter of fact, in order to see a glimpse at how should probably looks like, if you go to USMF, you see that indeed the accounts are different. And cost of unit delivered, for example, happens to be finished good inventory, whereas cost of good delivered, it would be a completely different name. Like, for example, if you take a look at it, that would be something in regard to different type of accounts. And as a matter of fact, if I go to the view details of this account, you notice that even the type may be different, is an expense. So they keep track of it a bit differently, whereas like 140200 is a type of an asset. So you see, finance team and distribution and trade team as a functional consultant should have this as the major and the most important piece of communication. Finance department at the company that you're going to implement this decides about these accounts. Or if they don't know, you should advise them to create an account and or use an existing account. After that, we do have another piece of information that needs to be set up, and that would be inventory policies, or we know it as an item model group. And as I've explained before, in USMF there are so many different groups, and why do we want to group items based on similarities perhaps of the way you would like to set perhaps some sort of a policy against the environment. So if I switch my company to Seahorse Retailers, you'll see that in my previous session I just made one as non-stockable and the other one as just a simple FIFO, which we talk a bit about costing of it in this session. What I'd like to do for my demonstration as a review, I'd like to just get it started by creating of a brand new item model group. I call it STD. It stands for Standard Costing Model. It is a stock product, but as you notice, as part of this scenario, I do have a checkbox, include physical inventory, fixed receipt price and all that, which I like to show to you as part of a demonstration. If you pay attention here for a second on the FIFO, you could include the physical value or fixed asset too, if you wanted it to, but the catch here is on the value of the standard costing. As soon as you choose that, this a specific item model group makes a huge difference. And that requires you to identify the first cost in order to store it in the inventory. And I'll give you an example. What does it mean? Imagine you own a vending machine as a retailer and you're selling soft beverages. When you buy a soft beverage, such as like a bottle of water, let's say, you buy it for 50 cents and then you place it into your vending machine. Vending machine probably cool it a bit, so you spend energy and electricity, but you get a bill for that electricity and you would like to know, that machine cost me like, I don't know, maybe $30 a month in order to make it operational. How would I distribute this cost of electricity across multiple items that I'm selling? So that would be a cost of having that specific bottle in the vending machine until it's sold. So there are so many different specific policies that are available. Few things that we will discuss as we move along as part of my future session, but as a review, registration requirements requires you in order to register prior to receiving the goods, which I'm going to demonstrate these things to you. And then picking requirements means that you have to pick it before you be able to create a packing slip. And receiving requirements means you have to receive the goods before you accept the vendor invoice, and deduction requirements means that you have to create a packing slip before you could invoice the customer. These are the things are going to be discussed. Also, I'm going to show you quarantine management and all. But one of the other things that I'd like to show to you today is the approved vendor list. The approved vendor list by default is set to warning only. That means if you're buying something, you're going to receive a warning saying that this vendor that you have chosen has not been approved. There are two ways to do it. Either you basically change it on the product, which I'm going to show it to you shortly, or you could basically do it right from here and say, don't check it or don't allow it. So this is very important due to your policies. And as part of a policy, I just wanted to remind you again, if I duplicate, one of the informations that we heavily discussed at the beginning of our session was in regard to organization administration. And we did talk about organizational hierarchy purposes. And one of them was procurement internal control. And if you remember, I created my specific organizational hierarchy and I added it as part of the purposes available. And I went to procurement and sourcing and indeed went to the policies form. And the purchasing policy, if you recall, I created GTL demo here. And as a matter of fact, you notice that this is basically associated with one of this organization. And as a matter of fact, you could specify for which department, and you could specify a rule such as category policy rule and literally apply what type of information would you like to have on it. Like, for example, category access policy rule or anything else that you have in here. You could actually define those type of rules and create them as you would like to. I'd like to remind you about that. If I wanted to create a brand new one, and I call it, let's say, delete me, I can simply pick and choose a company of my choice from the typical companies as a hierarchy, or choose the SRHQ organizational hierarchy. Or alternatively, you can go to the parameter and pick and choose the one of your choice and add it into the specific order of precedence and say which one should be taken care of first. Like before Sears retailers, you can go with Pelican, let's say. And after that, you can pick and choose a particular rule of yours, like category policy rule, and say, you know what, Pelican should be considered first. So if you see this like double vision is just a cosmetic bug, should be fixed, don't worry, it's working fine. It's just like not working the way you should probably expect. It should go up the chain and not necessarily show it to you as a double vision here. So you have to click somewhere else and then it will show properly. So keep that in mind. Then I click close, and here all you need to do is refresh this form, and then I can pick and choose Pelican, and as a matter of fact, for example, operation, I can add it in. To begin with, when you add a node from one hierarchy, you won't be able to mix nodes from multiple hierarchies. You have to create a different policy. And in regard to the category policy, I can create a brand new one. And like I said, you have a capability to add from your categories, which we talk about a bit more. For example, if somebody wants to buy a computer, you may say, you know what, allow any vendor or allow only the vendors that are preferred for this category or that are approved for this category. And again, you have receiving requirements, deduction requirements, etc. We'll talk about invoice matching and validation later. Not that I'm going to continue with this. I'm going to just click close and we're going to move forward. And you can make it inactive. That means you're not going to work with it actually. So at this stage I can retire the policy and I don't want to have it to be affecting the system at all. So this is now not active, as you see. So as part of an item group, I set this up to be no check. And now I'd like to give you a case. My case is starting visually. You probably want to create something off of other materials. So let's consider a simple bottle, and then you may have a lid on it, right? And then you may have liquid in it. And this liquid could be two different kinds. And the liquid processing is batch enabled. That means in case of production, you receive a batch number, so you can do the tracking in case of contamination. You can recall it. Or you may have different batch with different characteristics. We know it as a batch attributes. We talk a lot about these things as part of manufacturing. But let's say for water, you have a flat water and you have a sparkling water. But both of them are going to the same container and they have a lid on it. And for commercial purposes, you may have different labels. Like for example, if you're selling US, it would be like fluid ounce, for example. But whereas when you go to other countries that are using metric system, they probably use a different one. Like instead of fluid ounce, say is a milliliter, something like that. What we need to do, we need to identify the raw materials. So obviously, this is the first one. I need like a bottle, like I said. I need a cap. I need the actual products like liquid. And this liquid itself could be, like I said, flat or sparkling. This indeed is a decision that you will make. If you would like to have this, you have to consider flat and sparkling should be a unique product for process manufacturing. So you need to have 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 products, and then finally the label. Obviously you don't put the label for the flat and the sparkling or vice versa. So therefore you need also 2 labels, or maybe more, depending on where you would like to package it. But the catch here is this is indeed one product itself, which we know as a water. So the water consists of a bunch of materials, which we know as a bill of material, and that would be a good review from my previous session. As part of a BOM, you say how much of each do you need to make this. Needless to say, this time I'm focusing on standard costing because manufacturing, they have an agreement, and as part of our other session, we talk about agreements and they say, okay, let's figure it out, how much am I buying it now? And then we can negotiate with the vendor and create a trade agreement. So my storytelling is basically also based on business practices and how you evolve based on understanding and discovery of the customer's need and perhaps implement, demo, and create a proof of concept properly to make sure everybody is good to go. So now let's get going and get to it. As I mentioned, I introduced the product information management, and I said you could indeed bring a product from all products and product masters and release it into any legal entity of your choice, and it will show exactly what legal entity you have authorized that for. Or you could actually directly go and release the product right from here. What happens, you don't have to release the product anymore after you made it, but you require, in order to basically make sure that you address a series of different questions like item group, item model group, storage, tracking dimension group, and all that we have talked about it in previous session. So I try to put it in a good form of an exercise at this stage. We talked about 2 different types, item and a service. Let's go with an item, and you can create a simple product. Again, you could have a product master, which I'm going to show it to you as well. One of the tips and tricks that you have, if you have a dialog box open like this, and you can't see behind the scene, and you would like to really see the other columns there, most of you probably say, oh my gosh, I got to cancel this out after I answered all of these, but you don't have to. All you need to do, click on an area outside of your dialog box and hold it down so you can see it nicely. And then you can release it, get it back. That's a trick. So if I go to the product number, in order to make it a bit more intelligent, what I like to do, try to create series of different products. So I start with water. Of course, this should be numerical, but for my demonstration, I do alphabetical, obviously. I say water, for example, cap. And this water cap is the first product I'm going to make. Now, if you want to sell it in a retail channel, you have to associate that with a retail channel, retail category. You should take the retail training. If you are going to scale it and sell it by weight, then you have to select that. That would be part of manufacturing course as well. But I'd like to show the item model group. Probably say these are important and they should be mandatory, but they're not really, because maybe a product designer designs it, but the product engineer literally adds additional information here, and then the product manager is basically approving it, and then you can activate it as a product designer again. We know that we need to have an item model group. I've already made the standard costing, so then on the item group, since I've already only have one, and I cannot iterate more and emphasize more that this is not necessarily a best practice, to shorten my demonstration, I only made one item group, and here I only made one account for all of these activities, which, as I mentioned again, which is very important, is not necessarily the best practice. Just shorten my demos. You have to make sure you properly map it to a right accounts. And then the storage dimension group, for this one, I just go with the site and a warehouse. And indeed, on the tracking dimension group, maybe I don't want to track anything. And since on the inventory parameter I've already set up the default unit, these have been populated. So I keep it as it is, or I can change it if I want to. And as a matter of fact, I can say there are pieces of caps. So I can change it to unit of pieces. Of course, that unit should exist. If you have an item sales tax group or anything else that could be associated with, you could apply it here. Because we are not focusing on the finance, I'm not going to talk about that right now. You could default the vendor for this. And then obviously from this vendor, you could link it to a vendor item number that links it, because the vendor item may be different from your product number. Purchase price and sales price could be set up here. Let's say you're not necessarily selling it alone, it's part of a raw material. I put $1, but I'm not going to sell it. And inventory price, I don't know how much it's going to be. Maybe it's going to cost me 2 more cents extra to store it. So I just wanted to keep it here for you to see what effect would it have when we go to the standard costing. So out of this, the first thing you should do as a best practice, click on the production action pane and click on the validate and make sure that you have everything required. Off of this, not to waste the time, I can create a template, and I can create a personal template for myself. If you would like to share that template with other colleagues of yours that you can use it, you could use a shared template. But for your specific demo, I just use a personal template, and I call it actually water. And right over here, I can specify a series of different information, but it's a bit early. What I like to do, before I create a template, I can add additional information in here. One of the things that you need to consider, if the value of one of these raw materials changes, goes higher or lower, what effect would it have on the total cost of creation of this final good? So in order to do that, you can have a cost breakdown. So if you have a cost, if you would like to have visibility of the finance, is the responsibility of the distribution and trade and supply chain engineers and functional consultants to make sure how to group the costs accordingly as well. So let's talk about that a bit and get into the detail of it. First of all, there's a manage cost action pane. We keep it as it is, but as you see, there is one called manage cost on the action pane. Don't confuse it with right click somewhere and say collapse all the fast tabs so you can see everything better. There's a manage cost fast tab here that allows you to see that yes, you have identified the item group. As you see, there's a cost group. So let's see what do we have. These are legal entity specific. I don't have any cost group. I could directly go to my cost management, and part of here I could create cost groups right within here if I wanted to, which is right there. Or in order to shorten, while you're doing it, you can actually right-click View Detail it, and that jumps you to the same form. So I create a brand new one. But pay attention sometimes. It's rather nothing important, but some people, they see certain buttons are enabled even though you don't have a record. This should be disabled unless you have a header record to be created. So consider that this doesn't do anything. As a matter of fact, it gives you an error message. So as part of the cost group, you can call it raw materials, non-liquid, I call it. It would be more generic, okay? There are different types of costs that you can associate. One of them is like you're not defining it. You don't know how to define it. Based on future analysis, you may want to define, how do I categorize this cost? By the way, cost category and cost management could be a completely different advanced training we can talk about for hours. Direct material happens to be literally the cost of a direct material. That means you're buying something and you're storing it. Direct manufacturing, another terminology for it, is a labor cost. Indirect cost relates to certain costs that is going to be distributed across all of the products, but is not related to the creation or production or assembly of that product, like perhaps the delivery, rush fee, those type of things, or overhead, surcharges, Or you could go with direct outsourcing, which is literally outsourcing it to a vendor. Since this is the material, I use the raw material. The behavior could be based on a fixed cost or based on a variable cost. So depends on which one you would like to go with. You could go with either options. Again, you have to understand the fixed cost is always a fixed value, but variable cost is going to look at the formula. So for this one, I just go with the fixed cost, and usually you can have as many group as you like with the same type. Like you can have 10 direct materials and group them differently. But which one is a default? So I make this to be a default. And then here is the profit margin area. Whatever the cost gets calculated, how much should you suggest it to sell it? If you don't have any standard value as a percentage here, you're not actually incrementing the sales pricing to be suggested to the salesperson. So you're acting as a non-profit, and you're basically passing on the cost to be the sale price. But you're in a business, you're not as a necessarily, let's say, non-profit, is for-profit. So we say whatever the cost is, just add in 25% on the total cost to be a standard costing. And perhaps you could have, based on a profit level 1 for tier 1, make it a 50%. And then profit number 2, let's say make it 100%, you see. And then profit number 3, intentionally, I'm actually going to be a bit more aggressive, and I put 175 due to specific events, geopolitical situation. Maybe the raw materials gets too expensive and you need to sell it for higher values. So I set this up, and I have a raw materials here. Then I create another one, and I call it, let's say, liquid, and I call it all the liquid stuff, all right? And I make this to be indeed direct manufacturing, and I say variable cost for this one. And since I've already got a default for this type, I don't need to set that up. And here I just simply make it to be 75 for the standard, and indeed profit level 1 to be 110. And I'm not going to even bother with profit 2 and 3. If you don't have it, it's not going to consider those at all. So it's just not going to pass on the cost for those values. Now, after that, all you need to do is associate the cost group for this, which we call it the raw. Now, after I set this up, there are a series of other stuff that are required in case you have financial dimension. It's a good idea to make sure that you specify the mandatory financial dimension to be specified here. So that gets defaulted. For example, I just call it as part of my consultation or training, but that could be indeed be a proper term, such as maybe the name that you see here, like for trade show, marketing campaign, for a specific department maybe. I just made this up as part of our finance training, and this finance training requires you to have like US logistics, for example, or any other logistics to specify a value here is mandatory. Finance department enforces that. Anyhow, having said that, we just want to make sure everything's good to go. And in order not to waste the time, I just wanted to pinpoint on one more thing. I just wanted to also have your attention when you want to buy something. If you have an approved vendor, you could set that up and actually associate that with a particular vendor of your choice. And if I add a vendor here, and if you don't have anything, which I'm going to make one right now, you have to be able to associate which vendor happens to be the actual vendor that sells goods to you. So let's say the vendor that I would like to choose is, the name of it could be, for example, Indeed Guide to Sell, I call it. And then I can associate it with a group. You see, group is mandatory, so usually finance team has those things, but I say like 01, or it could do, for example, alphanumerical A1. You can group it whatever you want. I just call it 01, and I call it domestic vendors. And here, the terms of payments, you could say, how long do they give me to pay them? And usually that would be another process they need to consider. Like, for example, they give me 30 days to pay. So obviously I have 30 days from the invoice date to pay. Needless to say, you could have an installment plan, which we don't discuss it at this moment. And then would we accept certified companies check? Do you process credit card? All of those things. So anyhow, that would be net 30. And for now, I'm okay with it. And I have 30 days to pay. All right. Now, time between invoice and due date of the payment date may be a bit different. Like, could be 3 days. By the time the due date comes, between the due date and period of the payment that you have to pay, maybe you have an agreement to wait 30 days for company regular check to be cleared or immediate when it's certified check, and default sales tax group, or maybe excluded from the search result and make this a specific type of a vendor that are a member of this group to be hidden, not to be shown, and only a group of people can work with them. These are the basics of what you need to do in order to make your first vendor. And the rest of the information, of course, we're not that keen about. All I need to say is literally 2 things. Number 1, how would you accept the payment? And that would be the method of payment that you can specify. Is it a company check? Is it, for example, electronic payments? I just want to make one method of payment and I call it check. And as a matter of fact, is it going to be based on one invoice? That means you cut one check for one invoice for all days or total. I just make it simple. All of these things, by the way, you don't have to be worried about as a trade and logistic. Finance team are giving it to you. So you just have to use it. However, as part of my demonstration, you just have to understand the relationship between distribution and trade and finance. So it would be good to either work with your functional team in finance or at least get a glance of what is needed. So as part of this, I'm just going to set this up, and as part of the bank check layout that has already been taken care of, we have to say, yeah, whatever is on this check, just go ahead and transfer all of the transactional data. When I want to export it, just print it out on that check. That's all I need to do. So that would be the method of payment. For this, in finance training, we talk a lot about so many other aspects of it. We basically may offer a cash discount, and this cash discount literally will be given to a group of customers of your vendors, which you could be one, and they could say, I offer you 10% if you pay within, let's say, the first 15 days. I'm just making up with this acronym. So I say the net is 10 days and the percentage is 15. So that way you can link it and say, what would be the main accounts for receivable, which we have already created it, obviously. We call it the customer cash discount. And here we could say use it for vendor cash discount. That means you basically can use the same cash discounts applied to the customer or vendors. Again, none of these should matter to you because it should be set up. The only thing you should care about is the cash discount setup, that you say, okay, if I pay sooner, how much money do I save? So that would be a perk that usually your vendors are giving you. Now, financial dimension mandatory setting. If you set it up, you don't have any other issue. For this time, I use training here and get it over with. So now let's go back. We're just preparing a proper settings and finalizing things as we move forward. So as you see, in the Pelican vendors here, if I backpedal and go back to the previous page now, indeed I have a vendor. That means the Pelican 00001, which is guide to sell, is an approved vendor list. You could do that. And as a matter of fact, no longer if the item model group that you had in here, which happens to be the standard, would have said that, set it on the warning, you wouldn't get a warning if you would have used that vendor. But I set no check anyway, so I don't care about it. Now, I close this down and we go back. And now, I like to save some time. I like to introduce the personal template and I call it, let's say, water. And I click OK. So many of the things that I'm setting up would be right here. But as you notice, one of the things that I like to show you is default order settings. Let's take a look at very important policies here. To begin with, as you notice, the default purchase order type is purchase order. But are you going to produce it or are you going to produce it as a lean manufacturing? It makes a huge difference. Many of our sessions are going to be based on a purchase order. Intentionally, I'm just going to specify warehouse 11 when I want to buy it. And also warehouse 11 when I would like to basically store it. But I'm not intentionally put anything on the cells because I'm not going to necessarily sell the water cap. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. So I don't care about these things. And I click close. Now, one of the other things you need to consider is the cell itself. The value, as you notice, on the basis that you have placed is the price quantity that I plug in here. What's the price quantity? This is a typical mistake that functional consultants that are new to the system, they plug in the value like 7.45 cents or something on the quantity. That's different from plugging the value here on the actual base price. So make sure the base price is going to be set up. That's the actual base price. So long story short, you have the same thing when you actually have it for the purchase. Make sure, again, you don't make that mistake, which I have not done so. I said, yeah, that's the price. This is $1. Intentionally, I keep it as it is. Now, I'm going to make another template because I changed something after I made my template. So up to that moment, see if it's going to get water or water 2. Water 2 should indeed include the values that I put in for the default order settings, correct? And while we're here, when you're buying something, you could benefit from multiple, minimum, maximum, etc. So for this one, you could specify nothing for now in order to make the job a lot easier because this acts as a template. And then later, I'm going to modify one of them and I'll teach you another subject matter. Now, see that everything is going to go a lot quicker. So I have water container. We go to the apply templates. If I choose water 2, that also includes the information that I've added in the inventory warehouse management. As you notice, automatically fulfill item model group as a standard, item group, site and warehouse, and tracking. Everything gets populated. So things become a bit more easier because I have a template. And again, you could overwrite these values. You're not supposed to put in anything here, maybe. You don't want to put anything. And you can overwrite the purchase price and all that. I click OK, and guess what? The second product is available, and I'll go to the validate, and I want to prove the concept to you. Anything I've ever done. By the way, when you click on a fast tab and it doesn't show it, click somewhere else and expand or collapse all. Even the financial dimensions and manage costs has been specified. So that's great. But if you take a look at the manage inventory default order settings, unfortunately the template does not include any data that is coming from action pane. So whatever you have, any data that you have in regard to any of these values, any parameters on any of these fast tabs would be stored in the template, not those that you set up on the action pane. For this one, on the water bottle, always make sure it's validated and everything is good to go. And on the manage inventory, like I said, if I'm just going to buy it, I'm just going to put in warehouse 11. And also when I want to store it, I put it on warehouse 11. Why do I do this right now? We're basically simplifying the future data entry. But you may ask, if I have like thousands of items, should I do this manually? Absolutely not. Because you do have a workspace, and we do have indeed the data management. And right within here, you could indeed import data from legacy system. And you just have to properly map it. So at this stage, you can literally import data from somewhere else or export data and bring it somewhere else. In each regard, you could have an even template if you wanted it to. Let's take a look for a second. Not that I'm going to do anything with this. I just wanted to show you that there are so many different standard formats like Excel, CSV. And if you take a look at the entity, there are so many things that are available in regard to the entities that will be coming up, that there are over 4,000 or 5,000 entities that are available. You can bring lots of data like bank journals, and customers, purchase orders, sales orders. You can bring all of them over. And as a matter of fact, you would be able to see all of those entities here. Now, we're going to go back to my demo. On the release product, I've already made a couple. And what I'm about to do, continue. So based on my design, I have a cap, I have a bottle. I need to have a couple of products, fluid and sparkling, or flat and sparkling liquid. And then, of course, I will need a couple called labels and get it over with. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a brand new one. And here for the item, I'm just going to make it to be water flat. On the water flat, however, I apply the template. But instead of having tracking dimension group, I actually use it as a batch physical because it's a liquid. And as a reminder, on the tracking dimension group, the batch number is required. You're buying a batch, so for this one, I intentionally put fluid ounce for the inventory. And then obviously the purchase unit and sales unit and BOM unit could be fluid ounce too. Now, after I created this is batch enabled now. I click OK. I could overwrite the template, obviously. But as a reminder, if I have a standard template and you would like to keep track of when you have received the goods from the vendor, you could specify the batch vendor to be registered upon registration. If you select this option, a dialog box will appear. And it's going to ask you, okay, what's the vendor batch? So you can match it and record it. That would be another policy. And now, for reservation areas, there's a batch disposition code. And as a matter of fact, you can create it and see what you can do with it. You can actually come here and create one rule and say, you know what, it is available, let's say. So you could do whatever you want. And the disposition code is available. And then, obviously, when you do that, you won't be able to block anything because it's available. However, if I make another one and say it's unavailable, you could actually say, you know what, don't allow anybody to reserve it, or don't allow anybody to pick it when you want to sell it. Maybe don't allow transferring, or maybe you do, but don't allow production. So there are so many things you could do with these two batch disposition codes. So I just make it to be available as a default for this group of items. But any products after change is going to take that effect. So keep that in mind. Now, having said that, I'd like to go and associate another things in regard to my managed cost and associate that with a completely different cost group. Not raw, we go with the liquid, which I've already made that available, which is related to the raw material. So this would be the liquid, but on top of it, like I said, this requires a batch number, right? Aside from typical financial dimension that came from your template, you do require to indeed associate on the inventory a specific batch number to be created, either manually or automatically. Maybe you would like to have it to be automatically created. One batch for a specific environment, like for example, I'll call it B, it stands for batch. An auto batch. Would you like to include the date? Would you like to include the reference number, lot ID? Do you want to have a number sequence? Sure, why not? I use a number sequence that is suggested. Do you want to make it manually or not? And then we do it for inventory transaction and physical update. If I put a quantity for like 10, it's going to make a batch for 10 of whatever the unit is. If I don't put anything, it's going to make a batch for as many as you buy, or as many as you basically have it in the batch for the unit. While I'm at it, I'm making another one. I call it S. It stands for serial. But this time, like I said, we can basically go ahead and use, again, number sequence. Maybe I use a completely different number sequence for this. And I say, you know what, have a unique number sequence to be associated here. That means I want to have one serial number for each item. I could have the same serial number for each two. So again, similar behavior. Or if I don't put anything, I can say one serial number for as many as you generate. So you have that capability. However, there is a way that you can control to say whether or not do you accept one, and would you want to have indeed one specific tracking dimension group to really make sure that serial numbers are unique. And as a matter of fact, there is a serial number control. And if you turn this on, you cannot exceed more than one as a quantity. So just wanted to remind you what we're talking about in here and why we're setting things up. For the batch, I'm just going to pick a batch and system automatically takes care of it. And I save it. Okay. Now, off of this, obviously, you could create another template if you want to and then carry forward. But I'm just going to carry this with flat water label. Intentionally, I keep it as each. Apply the template if I wanted it to or not. It's completely up to you. I make the item to be indeed a standard costing again, item group to be the same, side and a warehouse, tracking dimension to be none because it's just label. Keep it as each, you see? And I click OK. And as part of the cost, may or may not be associated with a different group, which again, since I didn't pick a template, I have to pick and choose that one. And I didn't specify any other managed inventory, if you remember. Just wanted to show you some do, some don't, see what will be the effect, and you be the judge when you do consultation. Now, having said that, let's go on and wrap up. We're going to go with the water sparkling. I just call it water SP. This would be coming from templates that we have, but this time I go with a milliliter instead of fluid ounce because I'd like to show you, you may come from different countries, and listening to this lecture, it would be important to understand the units and all. So That's physical batch. So I click OK. And again, this could be relates to the managed cost that we were talking about. It is indeed associated with the liquid over here. Last and final would be label for sparkling. I'm just going to apply the template for water 2. It's going to come over, and for this, I'm just going to take the same thing as pieces. That's fine with me. So just going to click OK on that one. Now, time comes that you need to create the final good. First of all, you could have a service as a product too, as we discussed in previous session. On the item, you have a subtype called product master. So I call it a water. As soon as the product master, then you need to have indeed a product dimension group. So I call this water, and indeed here I need to specify the product dimension group that at least has configuration enabled. And as a reminder from previous sessions, configuration size, color, and style are available, and new to Dynamics 365, you could extend any of these inventory dimensions to be customized. In other words, your developer can add more to it. But for configuration, I'm just happy with it. Needless to say, you could go with the size, a small bottle, large bottle, etc. Make it simple, yeah? I click close. And now there are 3 different types of technology. Predefined variants is like you define the variants. But I like to talk about dimension-based configuration at this time. That means you create rules and you say which one is going to come first. And then constraint-based configuration is based on constraints and using configurator, which is completely outside of the scope of our training at this time. It requires advanced training. So let's go with the dimension-based configuration. Advice to you. If you miss this, unfortunately, you can't change it later. You have to delete the product if you don't have any inventory transaction. But if you do, nothing you could do with that item. You just have to retire it and create a brand new one. So extra caution, configuration technology. If you make a mistake here, you can't change it later. You have to literally create a new product. Apply a template based on a water, and it still is coming up because they're using the same item model group. For this one, I'm using the batch and serial. And if you take a look at it, actually requires batch number and serial number. And it happens that serial number is serial number control. That means you have to have one anyway for each. So I'm going to show both of them to you. And as a matter of fact, here, I can use one of the units that I made. I call it bottle. I'm selling actual bottle here, and I associate this. So what is the technology behind the scene? The way we are working with the configuration technology will be demonstrated for you, and you will see it shortly. So this is the actual final good. Now, to begin with, I like to make it a bit more intelligent. I'm not going to buy this. I'm going to make it. Even though I'm not teaching you production courses, I like to demonstrate the simulation of how you could define a production order. And intentionally, I'm just going to specify a warehouse that is not on the same site. It's going to be site 21. Of course, I'm not going to buy this, right? I'm not going to buy this, but having the default site and warehouse, it doesn't hurt. But I would certainly want to store it in site 2, warehouse 21, and I would perhaps sell it from the same site to save some time. But it could be a completely different site too. But the catch here is this production. That's important for you to understand. And as a matter of fact, just for information, right there when you are in engineer, this any other products is like production type are available. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at like water cab, the value, as you notice, for engineering tab is actually set up to the BOM too. So any product could be a BOM, as I've explained before. But at this stage, we are just going to talk about water, hide the show list, and I'd like to show you what will happen here. First of all, one thing you need to consider. This requires a batch number and serial number, obviously, so the system should make it for me. And another thing you need to consider is about cost. As you see, this should indeed be emptied if and only if this is the final good. That means you're not going to include this as part of another BOM. In my previous session, if you remember, I made this to be a BOM line as part of another BOM, if you recall. If that's the case, cost group would be important. But in my demonstration, that's my final good. That means literally, I'm not going to include the water as part of any other raw material. It's just a final good. Now, you don't have to have it. You have it, doesn't matter. Now, having said that, we're going to go to the engineer, and we need to define series of different values here. So at this stage, I can go to the designer, and right off of here, I can literally go to the BOM and create a brand new version. And I call this version 1, GTL1, and you could make it site specific. Or if you don't put anything, you can produce it anywhere. I intentionally make it site specific. That means you have to make this in site 2. I click OK, and right from here, I can add BOM lines. So let's go ahead and add some components over here. So obviously, I told you that even though there's a checklist here, unfortunately, the development team don't allow you to select multiple lines. Everything requires a bottle. Let's say in my scenario, I add a line right after the bottle, or right before, actually. Yeah, it doesn't matter how you do it. You could go with a cap, just insert it on top, and then on the bottle right after, I can add another component after this and put a sparkling water, okay? And then right after, I could put, let's say, flat water, the liquids, but oh, I like to really organize this. What do? I select this line, and then I go before line or after line, and I actually put a label of a sparkling there. Just wanted to show you the flexibility of the system. It really doesn't matter how you arrange it. It's just a way for visibility purposes. So keep that in mind. System has a fantastic feature in order to say which one goes before the other. So keep that in mind. So if I have a sparkling water, okay, you have a sparkling, and if you add it twice, it just like doesn't make any sense. So what do? I can actually go ahead and delete or edit or do whatever I need. If I go and do edit, it actually comes here and gives me the capability to assign certain values right there and then. But if I wanted to get rid of it, you can just delete it. So I already had that. So what I need to do, just add something like after the line and go with a flat label rather, this one. So I click OK. Now I have all the ingredients. But of course, in regard to production, you're not going to mix them up. So what do we need to do? First of all, how many of each do I need? For the cap, edit, if I go there, yeah, I need 1. Fantastic. And I'm not usually wasting it. Needless to say, there are lots of information, self-explanatory, that from which warehouse is valid from what to what would be a subcontractor that sells it to you. And then the consumption calculation would be discussed shortly. But for the bottle, same thing. As you notice, if I go here, it's going to tell me that, yeah, you need 1 bottle. But let's say for the label, obviously, you need 1 pieces or whatever it is. You see, depending on the unit. And there's no waste for the label either, yeah? But for the sparkling, if I go to the edit, let's actually consider that for production of 1 sparkling water, let's just do a quick Bing search, huh? And literally say bottle water. Just search for it. Make it realistic. And as a matter of fact, if you take a look at any of these values, you could find out that maybe they have certain labels over here and they tell you exactly what is it. It's like 591 milliliter or maybe 12 ounces. So simply the customer is going to tell you, what is it? It's a milliliter. So I put in 591 milliliter. That's how much unit I need in order to put it in 1 bottle of water. But you may have some waste. How do you do it? Is that based on a variable? Is it based on a constant? Maybe variable requires a variable scrap, which is a percentage of what you're using. Like 10% of it is going to be wasted all the time. Of course, that's not good from manufacturing perspective. You like to reduce this cost, but based on your evaluation survey, discovery, you may say, you know what, usually we have a constant scrap of about 5 milliliter wasted between filling a bottle of the first and the second. So that's what it means. That means calculate that. And then, of course, I click OK. And then on the flat, though, if I go to the edit, you can specify it's going to be like 12 fluid ounces. And for consumption calculation, you could say, you know what, could have a variable scrap. I say about maybe 2% of it would be wasted. So I designed it, and now I can actually go to the BOM version. And right over here, as you notice, everything I've ever done is being specified here too, nicely. And all I need to do, perhaps approve it by a specific individual. That would be product engineer, and then product designer is going to come back and activate it. And of course, you could have as many as bill of materials as you like. All right, fantastic. So this is good to go. But I basically now like to have your attention to indeed see how many of each raw materials do we have? If I go to inventory management and take a look at on-hand list, you actually can tell that for any of these specific values that I have, starting with water, you see I can nicely filter it. It actually shows that I don't have anything at all, nothing whatsoever. So basically, since you don't have anything on the quantity, you have to first buy some stuff. So let's go ahead and just get it going. And I'd like to buy one and take advantage of certain journals in order to assume I have already raw materials in my premises. So the first thing you do is actually go into either accounts payable and use the purchase order, or use the procurement and sourcing in order to buy from the purchase orders, and then I take care of the rest of it using other means of technology, such as inventory journals. So right over here, I'm just going to use the only vendor I have for my demonstration. Of course, you could have more. And here, I'm going to make sure that this is a purchase order, and click OK. You basically live here for the rest of the sessions that I have with you. And we talk a lot about this stuff and the difference of a journal, whereas purchase order and all that. But let's go ahead and add a line over here. I edit this and I say I would like to add an item number. Let's go ahead and pick and choose the flat. That's the flat. As a matter of fact, it gives me 1. But that doesn't make any sense. I'd like to just talk about this right now. Let's actually go to the flat right over here and take a look at the beauty of navigation within Dynamics 365. Right within here, without leaving anywhere, I can actually come back and go to Manage Inventory and go to the default order setting. I know that when I want to buy this, even though I order this one, I didn't specify the default warehouse. Now, you know, it makes sense to specify that. Otherwise, you have to do it manually in the purchase order line. I could say the minimum order quantity is exactly what I've specified on this picture, which was 591 milliliter. So 591 would be the minimum order quantity. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to make a water bottle. That's what the minimum order quantity is all about. You see, I'm giving you a scenario, a storytelling, and tell you why you do what you do. But let's say you're not going to produce 1 bottle of water. You're going to produce 100. So what do? I just basically make it to be minimum order quantity to be 100. Maximum order quantity perhaps would be 150,000, whatever you like. And what would be the standard order quantity? That's the standard quantity. So you could also have multiple. And that would be a factor, like multiple of 2. So it automatically rounded up. Let me make this to be actually 1.5 million. That's much better. So what I do, 59, 100, 1.5 million, 591,000, multiply it by 2. Let's see the effect on it. I click close and close this. Remember, it was 1. Now, if I remove this, and an underline and type in the water flat, it's going to bring up the quantity. That's the standard. Can I go with 1 less? That would be the minimum quantity. Can I go with 100? It's going to prompt me, your minimum allowed quantity is 59,100. Do you want to use this one instead of 100? If I say yes, it's going to replace it. If I say no, it's going to take it. That's no problem. But if I just go with like 800, and say, yes, replace it, is going to bring up the minimum quantity. If I put in 2 million, it's going to say the maximum is this. Why? Because you may not have enough storage to hold it. Are you sure you want to do it? You see, lots of business intelligence in there. And I say, no, keep it or go for it. If I go with something like this, it's going to tell me that, look, again, this is a lot more than that. Should I include this? I say, yes, go with that one. But if I type in like 1.3, it actually doesn't give me any problem whatsoever. So it's just basically making sure if you have a round amount or not, it's going to take it properly. I just go with the default values, and then the unit price, I'm just going to actually say, how much am I going to buy this for? Like, for example, I'm going to say for each fluid ounce, it's going to be about maybe 1 cent for each fluid ounce. Net amount $591. All right. Now, I'm going to basically make sure that I'm going to add also water sparkling. Okay. For that, I'm just going to put in like 12,000 milliliter because each one of them 12 milliliter. And the unit price, let's say, you see it came up from the default values, right? So it's going to be a purchase price. Like, for example, that is going to be a sparkling. It's going to be about like 0.05. So now at this stage, the site might be specified. Why? Because unlike the previous product that I've defaulted it, I didn't default the site and the warehouse. So that's why you need to default it. So it makes the job a lot easier. And when you do that, maybe the price is different per. So at this stage, what I do, as you notice, is actually requires you to first go ahead and confirm this is specific purchase order. And then when it gets confirmed, it's going to enable receiving of the product right within the purchase order, and then you can bring the goods in to the system. Let's see if I can do that. If I do a product receipt, since I don't have costing for that site, it shouldn't give me the capability to do it. I type in a unique product receipt, which is equivalent of the packing slip number of your vendor. So at this stage, as you notice, it's telling me that you don't have any cost roll-up. So I can't receive it. I can't receive it. I don't understand how much it's going to cost you. What do I do with this scenario? Well, one of the things you need to consider, if I go to manage cost, which is a lot easier to take care of it from there, on the cost management, if I actually go to the costing version, I need to define a costing version here in order to keep track of what's going on. First of all, this is going to be the standard cost version, and I call it the seahorse. The block means, are you going to block using this? Of course, if you say yes, nobody can use it. If you say no, they can use it. But you may allow people to put the pending prices but not able to activate it. I say no because I'd like to have a freedom. So after I save this, I could actually go to the prices and add the item prices for all of my items in one shot. There are basically no active prices. That's what the error message was telling you. I can add literally the item number. I go with water. And right within here, for the water bottle, I say for side 1, the price is about 2 cents per quantity. I can do a down arrow, go to the next one, and say for the water cap, it's going to be for side 1. Maybe it's going to cost me 6 cents. Down arrow again, I go with the water flat. And then I could say for side 1, it's going to be about maybe 3 cents. And then this is costing, it's not purchasing. For the sparkling, I say for side 1, maybe it's going to be about 8 cents. Put some more realistic values in here. And then you have literally labels, right? So we go with the flat label, which actually is going to be about 1 cent. And then maybe label is a bit more artistic, so it's going to be more expensive. So these are all the values. So all you need to do literally, select all these, making sure that by selecting them all, and saving them all, you can activate the pending prices. Now they become inactive prices. So you have the capability now in order to be able to receive the goods. Let's try that again. If I go to the product receipt, now it knows exactly how much it's going to cost you, and it's not going to give you an error message. So you realize for the standard costing, you require to have a costing version. Unlike the previous sessions that I showed you, you could create raw materials and use it. Now, here is giving me another scenario, and it's telling me the posting detail, and it's telling me that inventory batch dimension must be specified. This is a different error message. As part of my training, I also teach you troubleshooting. What's going on with this? Well, if you really read the error message, it's telling you that for the water SP, you said you need to have a batch number, didn't you? So what do I need to do? I need to specify the batch number over here for this specific item. So if I go there, again, beautiful navigation, all I need to do, you realize that intentionally I did not default the values that the manufacturer should have. Like, for example, the value when it comes to batch number, which is a batch, and serial number, which is a serial. Even though it's a batch enable, I don't care about the serial, that would be good enough. Unlike the previous one, which was water, flat, that I did indeed have that. So I didn't have any issues with it, if you recall. System doesn't let you carry forward unless you really have all the policies set up. So again, G123, that would be the packing slip number. And this time certainly should go through and is going to actually save the information into the system in regard to the costing. And now you have enough in regard to availability on that item. And indeed, there are many ways that you can check it. One of them is just directly go to the inventory, go to on hand, and take a look at how much you got. So at this stage, pretty much we did what we need to do. Quickly, I'd just like to create a series of different inventory journals by going through inventory and go to the parameters. You can default them right within here. And as a matter of fact, you notice that as part of the journals, you have so many of them. One of them is movement that requires you to have a journal created for. What does this mean? Is not necessarily meaning the inventory movement in regard to the physical. I just call it movement. It means that you're actually also changing the prices, or maybe you say how much it's going to cost you, and you have an offset account that you can specify as a default over here. And since I already have an offset account for inventory, I just basically use that, but that could be a completely different offset account that your financial team will give you for it. So I associate this for the default. I'd like to show you transfer later. So I'm just going to create that too, ITRN. That would be a transfer journal. We're going to use it later in our other sessions. And then set that up. We would need adjustment, which is very similar to the movement, but it's just like bringing up the opening balances of your inventory in here without the account, and I associate that. We will discuss in our next session in regard to the counting, which is important. So we're going to go with ICNT, for example, counting. Also, we have tag counting, which proposes a series of different counting journals to be generated, like you receive a pallet or box or whatnot. I call it tag, and that would be tag counting. So I'm going to demonstrate all these for you. The only thing I'm not going to necessarily talk about is the catch weight. I would show ownership change for you, so let's go with that. For consignments, I call it owner, ownership or consignment. So that means you don't own it, somebody else does. So you have to actually change that and make it yourself. We don't talk about production, batch merge, catch weight, none of those. Arrival journal we will talk about as part of our training. I'm going to create that. This is actually a warehouse journal, so I call it warehouse arrival. And then I pick and choose this one. If you set it up right within here, you're better off. And finally, I'm going to show it to you how to really put it together and mimic a BOM or bill of material. And then we mimic the production right there. So at this stage, we pretty much covered everything that is necessary. But if you want to make a BOM, you need to also specify the levels. And as far as the accounting is concerned, you have to have a calculation group. And right here, let's get it over with. If I go to the calculation group, you notice that right here, you have to have at least one calculation group. So I call it, for example, water. If I want to do a calculation, look at the cost price, or if you couldn't find it, look at the purchase price and divide it based on a cost group or item sales price. So I keep it as a cost group. And you need to associate that here in order to be able to produce the bill of material. Because of that, the water itself requires to have indeed the BOM calculation to be set up properly. So we come back later and we continue in our next session in order to understand what's going on. However, last piece, remember, I bring the goods into warehouse 11, but if I want to produce it, got to go to warehouse 21. So for that, I also have to have indeed a series of different costing. So I go to the cost management again, go to the costing version. And as you notice, I've already got one standard cost. But look, one more time, if I go to the item pricing, I actually have a bunch of active prices here. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. What I can do, I can nicely use one of the feature here and I say copy item prices. And right within here, I have a capability to say, how do I do it? Is that from one version to the other? Am I going to include the active one, if I want to do it? And should I copy from an active? Is that per site? Am I going to change what? Am I going to change it per days? At what date a specific amount? And am I going to literally change the site, for example? You're copying things, in other words. I change the site from site 1 to site 2. And I say whatever the amount was, multiply it, for example, by maybe 1.5. And add, for example, this is a charge, changes in price or charges even. You can add that. You could copy from the active one. And cost of the type should be a standard costing. The version must be specified in that scenario. So you say, okay, look at all of the standard costing and copy from site 1 to site 2 and use this formula. When I click OK, nicely, it actually goes back to the pricing and it basically brings up different sets of values so you can modify them if you want to or activate the pending prices. So as you notice for each item, let's see, for the label SP right here, you have 9 cents for site 2, but if you take a look at this one, it's going to be 6 cents. I just have to go to now product information management, go to the release products. in order to have a bill of material, you also have to have, indeed, a costing available. So I go to the manage cost here, go to the item pricing, and I create a brand new one, and I could set the same thing right within here. And I actually use this version, becomes a standard cost, and I can set up for which site how much. But that's not making any sense. What should I do? You could do that for correction, but you should calculate the item cost. How much would it cost me in order to produce this good? So let's take a look. Remember, I don't have all the raw materials. I'm using the costing version. I'm actually using the specific configuration. I'm not done with it. What configuration? What combination? I'm way far off, because for each configuration you may have a different costing. If you remember, everything goes back to the concept of dimension-based configuration. That means you're far from making this BOM to be usable. In my next session, we're going to talk about the BOM version, and we actually talk about how do we create a bill of material, and we basically understand exactly how can we indeed create a configuration rule. I keep it as it is, and in next session we're going to carry forward and we're going to continue, and you understand the concept of configuration technology, predefined configuration, and also I show you a product master with services.